Here's a number that should make you set down your coffee. The average Social Security check in 2026 is $1,976 a month. That's $23,712 a year. Meanwhile, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the United States is $1,500 a month. And that's before you've eaten a single meal, filled a single prescription, or kept the lights on. Run that math, and you'll notice something terrifying. The retirement dream that was sold to an entire generation is quietly drowning, and nobody on cable news is telling you where the lifeboats are. But here's the thing they're not telling you. The lifeboats exist. They're just not in Miami, San Diego, or anywhere near an airport with a restoration hardware. They're in places that got skipped over, overlooked, left behind. Places where the water is just as blue, the sunsets are just as violent and gorgeous, and your $1,976 doesn't just survive, it breathes. Today, we're counting down 10 hidden U.S. beach towns where you can actually retire on Social Security alone. Not comfortably in a yacht sense, comfortably in a front porch sweet tea watching pelicans sense. Which, if you've been paying attention to what money does to people, might be the better deal anyway. Hit that like button if you're brave enough to see number 1, and subscribe because trust me, you are absolutely not ready for where this list is going.
Number 10. Port St. Joe, Florida. The Gulf Coast town that died and came back weirder and better. In 1841, Port St. Joe, Florida was hit by a yellow fever epidemic, followed almost immediately by a Category 4 hurricane that basically erased the town from the map. The locals rebuilt. Then, in 2018, Hurricane Michael, one of the strongest storms to ever make landfall in the continental U.S., came through and tried to finish the job. And here is where Port St. Joe reveals its whole personality. It didn't just survive, it got charming. Nestled along the forgotten elbow of Florida's forgotten coast, which is an actual marketing term and also just an honest description, Port St. Joe sits on St. Joseph Bay, where the water is gin-clear, warm, and almost completely tourist-free, because there's no direct interstate access, and no one has built a Margaritaville here yet. That last part is legally required to be the first thing you mention. The median home value in Port St. Joe hovers around $230,000, which is roughly half the Florida statewide median. You can still find modest two-bedroom homes in the $170,000 range, and if you're renting, expect to pay around $950 to $1,100 per month for a decent place, which actually makes Social Security math work when you factor in Florida's zero state income tax, meaning every dollar of your benefit check stays a full dollar. The population sits at just under 3,500. Crime is low. Violent crime runs well below the national average, and the primary local drama seems to involve disputes over whose oysters taste better, which is the kind of conflict you want to live near. The downtown has a hardware store, a good seafood spot, and a coffee shop that doesn't charge $7 for a latte, which in 2025 qualifies as a luxury amenity. What Reddit threads about the forgotten coast consistently say is this: it's the real Florida, the one that used to exist. Scallops in the bay in summer, dolphins that treat the boat channel like a personal highway, and a sky at night that actually has stars in it. The town is small enough that you will absolutely know your neighbors, which is either a comfort or a horror depending on your personality type. Choose accordingly.
Number 9. Ocean Springs, Mississippi. The art town that Mississippi is too modest to brag about. Most people, when they think of Mississippi, are not thinking sophisticated arts community, walkable downtown, and beachfront sunsets. Most people are wrong. Ocean Springs sits on the Gulf of Mexico just across the bridge from Biloxi, but atmospherically, it exists in an entirely different universe. This is the town where Walter Anderson, one of the most eccentric and genuinely visionary American artists of the 20th century, retreated alone to Horn Island by rowboat, painted directly onto the walls of a small cottage, and essentially created his own mythology. The town has never fully recovered from the presence of that energy, and that's a compliment. There's an art gallery every 30 feet. The downtown streets are canopied with live oaks. The coffee is actually good. Home prices in Ocean Springs have climbed since Katrina-era rediscovery, but you can still find homes in the $175,000 to $220,000 range in neighborhoods that don't require a tetanus shot. Rent for a one-bedroom runs $875 to $1,050, which puts Social Security in striking distance, especially since Mississippi has no state tax on Social Security income and a generally low cost of living across the board. Groceries run about 8% below the national average, utilities are reasonable, seafood is cheap because you're buying it from people who caught it that morning. The population is around 18,000, big enough to have a farmer's market, a hospital, and a wine bar, small enough that parking is not a personality-destroying experience. Violent crime is low by Mississippi standards and well below most comparable coastal towns in Florida. The beach itself, while not Caribbean clear like St. Joe, has a moody Spanish moss meets saltwater quality that photographs beautifully and feels in person like a Graham Greene novel set in the American South. Local Facebook groups are obsessed with three things: the annual Peter Anderson Arts Festival, stray cat colonies, and whether the new restaurant on Washington Avenue is as good as whatever it replaced. This is a sign of a healthy small town.
Number 8. Rockport, Texas. The Texas coast the tourists forgot to discover. Imagine a town where the bumper stickers say things like, "Keep Rockport weird," but the housing market hasn't gotten the memo from Austin yet. That's Rockport, Texas, a Gulf Coast fishing village and artist colony perched on Aransas Bay, where the hooping cranes winter, the redfish are plentiful, and the retirees who figured this out 5 years ago are very smug about it. Texas has no state income tax, full stop. Your Social Security check arrives and every penny of it is yours. That's not nothing. In fact, when you combine that with Rockport's median home price of approximately $265,000 and average one-bedroom rents around $950 to $1,100, you can make the numbers work with discipline and maybe a part-time shift at the bait shop if you're feeling ambitious. The town took a direct hit from Hurricane Harvey in 2017 and spent years rebuilding, which means a meaningful percentage of the housing stock is newer construction or gut renovated, which is not the worst thing. The population hovers around 11,000. The Pish and Pier is free. The Rockport Beach Park has been voted one of the cleanest beaches in Texas several years running, which sounds like a participation trophy but is actually genuinely true. The water quality here is consistently excellent by Gulf standards. What makes Rockport different from every other small Texas beach town is the Arts Center, which has been running since 1969 and draws actual working artists. There's a surprisingly good food scene anchored by fresh Gulf seafood. The blue crab situation alone could justify relocation. Birding tourism brings an eclectic, interesting crowd in the fall, and Aransas National Wildlife Refuge just up the road is essentially a free entertainment subscription for the rest of your life. The trade-off: summers are brutal in a very Texas way, humidity that feels personal, heat that makes the air shimmer off the asphalt like it's angry at you specifically. But that's what front porch screened rooms and cold Topo Chico are for.
Number 7. Brunswick, Georgia. Savannah's cheaper, saltier, less self-conscious neighbor. Everyone who moves to Savannah for the charm and the history and the squares ends up spending 6 months there before quietly relocating to Brunswick because rent in Savannah has gotten absolutely unhinged. Brunswick is what Savannah would be if Savannah stopped trying to impress you. Spanish moss still drapes the live oaks, the marsh still turns gold at sunset in a way that makes you briefly consider whether you've done anything to deserve this. But the median home price is around $200,000, and you can rent a decent place for $875 to $1,025 a month. Georgia exempts up to $65,000 of retirement income from state taxes per individual, which for Social Security purposes means most retirees pay essentially nothing to the state. That, combined with Brunswick's below national average cost of living, puts this squarely in the actually viable category. The city itself, population around 17,000, sits on a bluff above the Brunswick River with views of the Golden Isles, the string of barrier islands that includes Sea Island and Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island, which is a 30-minute drive, is state-owned.
almost entirely undeveloped and free to walk its beaches. This is your backyard. Let that marinate. Brunswick's downtown has been in a decade-long comeback story that is finally actually working. The Ritz Theater hosts live music, the historic district has good bones and a few genuinely excellent restaurants. The locals on the Brunswick subreddit are the kind of proud but not defensive that marks a town that knows it's underrated and is quietly enjoying the secret. Crime stats in the downtown residential areas are manageable, though like most mid-sized southern cities, you'll want to research specific neighborhoods carefully before committing. The marshes of Glynn, immortalized by poet Sidney Lanier, literally surround the city and produce sunsets that look computer-generated. They're not.
Number 6. Southport, North Carolina. The town Nicholas Sparks used and then left the rest of us to find. Nicholas Sparks filmed A Walk to Remember here. He set multiple novels here, and then the tour buses never came, because Southport is not the kind of town that aggressively markets itself, and the locals would like to keep it that way, which you can find out by bringing it up at any bar and watching the facial expressions. Southport sits at the mouth of the Cape Fear River where it meets the Atlantic, and it is, without exaggeration, one of the most beautiful small towns in America. Population roughly 4,300, a working waterfront, streets lined with Victorian homes and live oaks, and an attitude toward tourism that can best be described as, "You're welcome here, but we're not changing anything for you." This is extremely refreshing. Median home prices in Southport hover around $340,000, higher than others on this list, but the rental market offers one-bedrooms at $1,000 to $1,200, and North Carolina taxes Social Security for incomes over a certain threshold, but has a lower overall cost structure than comparable coastal towns in Virginia or South Carolina. Property taxes are genuinely low. The Cape Fear region's healthcare infrastructure is solid, anchored by a major medical center in nearby Wilmington, 30 minutes north. The ferry to Bald Head Island runs from the Southport dock. Bald Head Island has no cars, just golf carts and a lighthouse built in 1817 that is the oldest standing lighthouse in North Carolina. You can visit it on a Tuesday for approximately nothing. Oak Island and Caswell Beach are within 10 minutes and offered the kind of uncrowded, wide, wind-battered Atlantic beach that reminds you why the ocean was worth all those centuries of sailing toward it. The downtown has independent restaurants, a river walk, a 4th of July festival that locals will tell you is the best in the state with such conviction that you'll just believe them. The vibe is small southern coastal town that read some books and has opinions. The best kind.
Number 5. Fernandina Beach, Florida. Florida before Florida became a theme park. There is a version of Florida that existed before the interstate highway system, before Disney, before the condo towers and the spring break economy, and the guy who swallowed a live goldfish on a dare at Senior Frogs. Fernandina Beach, on Amelia Island at the very top of Florida's Atlantic coast, is what remains of that version, and it is fighting hard to stay that way. The historic downtown, called Center Street, has more Victorian architecture per square foot than anywhere else in Florida, which is not something Florida usually gets to say about itself. The town has been under 8 different flags in its history, which has given it an architectural and cultural layering that feels more like a town from some alternate American timeline. Shrimp boats still work the harbor. The Shrimp Festival is absolutely mandatory. Here's the Social Security math. Median home values on Amelia Island proper run high, think $400,000 and climbing, but the town of Fernandina Beach has pockets, particularly north of Center Street and inland from the beach, where homes still sell in the $220,000 to $280,000 range. Rent for a one-bedroom sits at $1,050 to $1,250. Florida's zero state income tax does the heavy lifting here. Live frugally, cook at home, and your check gets you there. The beach itself, 8 miles of it with sea turtle nesting season from May through October, is wide, undeveloped, and backed by dunes and maritime forest rather than the wall of condominiums that defines most of Florida's Atlantic coastline. Nassau County has one of the lowest crime rates in Florida. The healthcare access is real. Jacksonville, a major medical hub, is 35 minutes south. Reddit threads on Florida retirement towns mention Fernandina Beach with a consistent reverence. It's what people think they're getting when they move to Florida. The weather is Florida without the Miami extremity, slightly milder summers, occasionally actual winters. The locals are a mix of seventh-generation Floridians and people who drove through once and never left, which is its own kind of quality control.
Number 4. Biloxi, Mississippi. Don't let the casinos fool you. There's a real town inside. Okay, stay with me here, because I know what you're thinking. Biloxi? The casino strip. And yes, the casinos are there, lined up along Highway 90 like a fever dream of neon and buffets. But Biloxi is not the casinos in the same way that Las Vegas is not just the strip. There's an actual city here, with actual history, actual neighborhoods, and the Gulf Coast waterfront that, once you turn your back on the slot machine glow, is genuinely beautiful. The median home price in Biloxi is approximately $175,000, among the lowest of any coastal city in the country. One-bedroom rentals run $800 to $950 per month. Mississippi has no state tax on Social Security. Groceries, utilities, and healthcare costs run consistently below national averages. This is, mathematically, one of the most livable Social Security situations in America if you can find the right neighborhood, which you absolutely can. The Biloxi Lighthouse, built in 1848, is one of the few lighthouses in America that sits in the median of a highway, which is either poetic or chaotic, depending on your mood. The Old Biloxi neighborhood, historic, mostly residential, away from the casino corridor, has a particular Gulf Coast charm. Narrow streets, elevated cottages, the smell of salt and frying seafood. The seafood industry here is centuries old, and the restaurants that have survived multiple hurricanes and economic waves earned that longevity. The Orr O'Keefe Museum of Art, designed by Frank Gehry, sits here, which is the kind of thing you don't expect from a place that also has a boomtown casino. The VA Medical Center in Biloxi is one of the largest in the South, which matters enormously for veterans. The beach, 26 miles of white sand across U.S. Highway 90, is a man-made barrier island of sand that somehow works, gleaming in the sun in a way that makes you forget for whole minutes that the Beau Rivage is behind you. The casino economy also means a robust job market for part-time supplemental work if your budget needs breathing room, and restaurant and entertainment options that outpace what you'd expect from a metro of 50,000.
Number 3. Cape Charles, Virginia, the Chesapeake's forgotten aristocrat. Cape Charles was built in 1884 as a railroad terminus town, the southern end of the rail line where everything and everyone was loaded onto ferries to cross the Chesapeake Bay to Norfolk. Then the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel opened in 1964, the railroad traffic evaporated, and Cape Charles, population today around 1,100, was essentially left in amber, a perfectly preserved Victorian railroad town on the southern tip of the eastern shore with a harbor, a main street, and the kind of silence that either heals you or slowly drives you insane. The architecture is extraordinary. Block after block of late 19th century commercial and residential buildings in genuine good condition. Wide, shaded streets, a town beach on the bay where the sunsets don't just happen, they perform. The Chesapeake Bay side means calm, warm, shallow water. No Atlantic waves, no riptides. Just the kind of water you can walk into at age 70 and feel genuinely grateful about. Home prices in Cape Charles have risen as Northern Virginia and D.C. money has discovered the eastern shore, but you can still find homes in the $220,000 to $290,000 range in town. Rentals in the $950 to $1,100 range do exist, though inventory is tight. The town's tiny size makes that inherently true. Virginia taxes Social Security for higher earners, but offers substantial deductions for retirees over 65, and the Eastern Shore's overall cost of living runs significantly below Northern Virginia's stratosphere.
The town's revival over the last 15 years has been careful and community-driven. Locally owned shops along Mason Avenue, a wine bar, an old-fashioned soda fountain that is not ironic, it's just there because it was always there. The Kipto Peak State Park, 5 minutes south, has birding trails along the Atlantic Flyway that are among the best on the East Coast. In October, the hawk migration turns the sky into something prehistoric. The isolation is real and must be acknowledged. You are on a peninsula. The nearest major hospital is across the bridge tunnel. That trade-off is either acceptable or disqualifying, and only you know which.
Number 2, Astoria, Oregon. The Pacific Northwest's moody, magnificent, defiant outlier. Astoria sits at the mouth of the Columbia River, where it finally, after 1,243 miles, gives up and collapses into the Pacific Ocean. This is both geographical fact and emotional metaphor for what living in Astoria feels like. It is one of the oldest American settlements west of the Rockies. It has been battered by weather, ignored by the tech boom, and inhabited for generations by Scandinavian fishermen and Finnish sauna enthusiasts who built their whole cultural identity around the idea that gray skies and hard work are not problems to be solved. The result is one of the most genuinely characterful small cities in America, population around 10,000. Victorian houses stacked on steep hills above the river. The Astoria column on Coxcomb Hill offering 360-degree views of the Columbia, the Cascades, and the Pacific. The Maritime Museum. The Goonies House, which exists and which the current owners have accepted they will never fully own because strangers will always be photographing it. The 1883 Flavel House Museum, a brewpub scene that punches dramatically above its weight. Median home prices in Astoria sit around $310,000, higher than other entries reflecting its increasing discovery by remote workers, but rentals still run $950 to $1,150 for a one-bedroom, and Oregon does not tax Social Security benefits. The general cost of living in Clatsop County is meaningfully lower than Portland or the Willamette Valley. The weather is the disclaimer. Astoria gets approximately 67 inches of rain per year. The sky from October through May is the color of an old pewter mug. Fog rolls in off the Pacific and sits in the river valley like it owns the place, because it does. But here is the thing the locals will tell you, the thing that Reddit threads about Astoria consistently come back to. It keeps the wrong people out. The beauty here is earned. The light when it finally breaks through in June, the Columbia glittering, the Bridge of the Gods visible from your porch, the Douglas firs steaming after a week of rain, is the specific reward for having stayed. The Pacific Ocean beach access, Seaside and Cannon Beach, each 20 minutes away, adds a dramatic, wild coastline that makes the Florida Gulf Coast feel like a swimming pool in comparison. Number 1. Port Angeles, Washington. The last affordable edge of the continent. Most people drive through Port Angeles. It's the ferry terminal for Victoria, BC, the place you go when you're going somewhere else. You buy a coffee, you wait for the boat, and you miss entirely the fact that you're in one of the most astonishing settings for a small American city that exists. A working harbor on the Strait of Juan de Fuca, Hurricane Ridge and the Olympic Mountains rising immediately behind the city to 5,700 feet, the rain shadow of the Olympics keeping the town drier than the coast, bald eagles hunting the harbor on Wednesday mornings like it's just a thing that happens. Port Angeles, population 20,000, median home price approximately $320,000, with genuine fixer opportunities still available in the $220,000 to $265,000 range if you look. Average one-bedroom rent at $925 to $1,100. And here is the number that changes everything. Washington State has no income tax. Zero. None. Your entire Social Security benefit, every dollar, is yours. Combined with the Olympic Peninsula's cost of living, which runs 10 to 15% below Seattle's baseline, and Port Angeles begins to make a kind of mathematical poetry. The Olympic National Park literally starts where the city ends, not near the city, at the city.
You can stand at the trailhead to Hurricane Ridge in 20 minutes from downtown. Old-growth forest, alpine meadows full of black-tailed deer, the Elwha River, whose dams were removed in the largest dam removal project in U.S. history, is actively, demonstrably healing itself. Salmon runs returning, the river reclaiming its original channels in real time. You get to watch an ecological miracle from your retirement home. That is genuinely not available at most price points. The town itself has a working-class honesty to it. It's not precious. It doesn't have a wine bar shaped like a barn. What it has is a thriving food co-op, a Carnegie Library, a first-rate maritime museum, 3 or 4 genuinely excellent restaurants, and a community of artists, veterans, nurses, teachers, and retired fishermen who have all separately concluded that the rest of the country has lost its mind and this peninsula is where sanity still lives. The local Reddit threads are full of people who moved here from California or Colorado and can't believe how much of their life they got back. The healthcare situation, a legitimate concern anywhere this remote, is served by Olympic Medical Center, a fully accredited hospital with a surprisingly strong reputation for a town this size. Seattle, with every specialist you'd ever need, is a 2.5-hour drive and a ferry ride. Not ideal for weekly trips, perfectly manageable for actual emergencies. The ferry view to Victoria is free to watch from the waterfront. The sun sets over the strait with the San Juan Islands in the distance and the sky doing things that Turner would have considered excessive. Those are just Tuesday. The mountains, the water, the eagle, the salmon river healing itself, the air that tastes like Douglas fir and salt and rain about to happen. This is number one not because it's the cheapest, though it's competitive. It's number one because it offers the fullest version of what retirement is supposed to mean. Time, beauty, quiet. A place that doesn't ask anything from you except that you pay attention. So there it is. 10 towns where Social Security isn't a punchline, where the water is real, the rent is manageable, and the life you actually imagined when someone said the word retirement is still available, just not where anyone told you to look. The formula, if you've been paying attention, no state income tax or generous retirement exemptions, rent under $1,100, a waterfront that isn't already ruined, and a community small enough that you matter. That combination exists. It just requires giving up the idea that retirement has to look like what they sold you in the commercials. The generic beach, the generic sunset, the generic couple in matching khakis. The real version is messier, quieter, saltier, and infinitely better. If this video saved you from a catastrophically expensive retirement mistake, hit that like button. The algorithm needs it, and so, apparently, does my ego. Subscribe if you want more of this, and leave a comment with the town you're seriously considering, because the comment section on these videos is genuinely the best free research tool you have. And here's the thing I didn't mention today. Some of the most extraordinary affordable retirement towns in America aren't on the coast at all. They're on rivers, on lakes, on Great Plains reservoirs, in mountain valleys where the elk outnumber the traffic lights. That list is coming. And number one on that list is going to make you question every decision you've ever made about where to live. You've been warned.